Good morning. I'm Dusky Terry, President of ITC Midwest. For the third straight year, we are pleased to be the presenting sponsor for the Iowa Ideas Conference and extraordinarily proud of our partnership with the Gazette. As an electric transmission company serving 2/3 of the state, ITC Midwest is invested in and has a very real stake in the future of Iowa. We've supported this conference since its inception because we embrace its mission of gathering hundreds of Iowans together to explore the key questions and the big ideas that will shape the future of our state. ITC Midwest was formed in 2007 to improve electric transmission reliability and increase transmission system capacity in Iowa. And we followed through on that commitment with more than $4.1 billion in capital investments to date. Our investments in the system not only serve the changing needs of customers, they also provide additional capacities to support economic growth and development of low-cost renewable energy resources. Our investments have resulted in a 62% drop in transmission-related outages since ITC acquired the system and began operating it. From extreme weather events such as last year's derecho to the unprecedented transition to renewable energy, from the rapid adoption of electric vehicles to the increasing focus on energy system resilience, the electric utility industry is suddenly in the national spotlight. All of these forces reinforce the critical role of the transmission grid to support the changing landscape and ensure consumers have access to low-cost, clean, and reliable electricity. You know, we often talk about here at ITC about the power of connection, meaning connections are needed to deliver power to communities. There's also tremendous power when people connect to solve problems. Over the next couple of days, I hope you will engage in the breakout sessions, speak up during discussions, and share your ideas to create a brighter future. Open your mind to different points of view as we all work together to come up with the best solutions for making Iowa an even better place now and in the future. I want to thank you for your participation to help shape the future and wish you a great conference.
Hi, good afternoon. It is 2 p.m. I am Michael Chevy Castronova, Iowa Ideas Magazine editor and business editor here at the Gazette. Welcome to our Iowa Ideas Conference discussion on what really is a sector that is affecting more people and more aspects of how we do business in the 21st century, even more so since the start of the pandemic last year than many of us ever would have thought possible. We probably have stories from Reuters, Associated Press, Bloomberg, Washington Post, AP, everybody, and plus us on a daily basis about something that's missing, something that's short, but something we don't know when it's going to get somewhere. So we're going to talk about that. If you think I'm overstating any of this when it comes to cargo and supply chain issues, that's what we're going to be talking about today via this magic of video conferencing. So we're going to start by having each of our panel members introduce themselves as they appear on my screen from left to right. Tell us your name, where you work, and a little bit about what you do there. Craig, let's start with you.
Sure. Craig Markley, Iowa Department of Transportation. I've been with the department since 1983 and been involved in just a ton of different things, but mostly long-range planning, grant programs for trails, industrial parks, things like that. Those are probably the two main topics for this group.
Mike?
Yeah, Mike Gannon, Chief Operating Officer for CRST. Ironically, I started at CRST in 1983, the same year Craig started at the DOT.
Was that a plan? I mean, did you guys talk about that?
I don't know. But most of my duties are overseeing our 6 different operating companies. So we have a flatbed division, a van division, 2 dedicated divisions, and a brokerage division. So,
okay, Marty.
Hi, Marty Lenz. And in 1983, I was still in high school. But yeah,
you get away with that once. You don't get to say that again.
No. So anyway, I'm airport director here at the Eastern Iowa Airport. Been at the airport for 7 years now, and been in the aviation space, airport management space for over 25 years now. in a variety of positions. And my job here at the airport is really about developing the airport, growing the airport. Both, we call it 4 key lines of business. So air service is one of them. Air cargo is another. Property development, and then of course general aviation and business aviation. So those are kind of the 4 key lines. But overarching theme of the job is really economic development and growing the airport to serve the region and of Eastern Iowa.
All right, thank you. So for those of you watching, you can enter your questions and comments in that little chat box there at the bottom of your screen. Those will go to our room host, who in turn will send them along to me. Please do not wait till the last 10 or 15 minutes of our panel to submit all your questions. You can do them. We will see them as they come up while we're doing this. Okay, so gentlemen, I have so many questions for you guys. Here's my big question. This is for all of you, one at a time. Cargo has been a robust commerce here in Iowa for many years. With its big haulers such as CRST and a good number of distribution centers, and the fact that we're, got Interstate 380 and 80 running across here. We're kind of sort of in the middle of the nation. And now cajillions more people are ordering lots more stuff online, from books to clothes to prescriptions. I have a friend who bought her car online. You name it, you probably can buy it online, and that's being shipped also. And that, of course, has been accelerated with more people staying home and working from home because of the coronavirus. So, executive summary, if you would, please. Here's my question from each of you. What's the most important thing we have here in Iowa? What do we need to do to maintain this pace and this kind of commerce? What's already in the works? And is this ever going to slow down? Who wants to go first with that? Because you're all involved in this in various aspects. Mike, you're going to go first. Mike, you go first.
I'll take a stab at it first, Michael. So I think the thing that we have going for us in Iowa, and you hit it on the head, is for people not in the trucking industry, especially, Interstate 80 and 380 running north-south, and our connection, one, to major transportation freight hubs in the Midwest, Minneapolis, Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City. Iowa is a great place to launch from and into. I would also say we're the gateway to the West. So there's a lot of freight that ships out west, and it's got to go through Iowa to get there. I think the thing that we've really seen, and I don't know how much of this Craig does with the DOT, but we've seen an uptick with the I-380 interchange, keeping that infrastructure up, expanding 80 especially, so that it can handle the truck traffic. We've all been on 80, and it seems like it's just an extension of First Avenue most times with the amount of traffic on it. So I think keeping up with the infrastructure, I think Iowa's done a good job. Expanding 30 to 4 lanes is kind of a big deal for our industry because it alleviates some of that congestion off of it. So the biggest one for me is just keep our infrastructure up and keep our roads going. Is it going to slow down? Absolutely not. And you hit it on the head with people buying more and more. The velocity of freight cargo that moves through the industry is just faster than it's ever been. And I don't see that slowing down.
Marty, what do you think?
Yeah, I would echo Mike on the infrastructure. I think we've got fantastic infrastructure and the highway systems around us. The state's done a great job with that. Great job supporting airports infrastructure as well. We're blessed here at CID to have incredible land space and opportunities to continue to grow and meet the air cargo volumes into the future. We just had a great expansion with UPS, a significant expansion for them here. And as far as slowing down, it certainly isn't in the air cargo space. I was just earlier this morning reading that the e-commerce side now represents over 15% of air cargo volume. and is increasing. And I think that what really bodes well for us in the air cargo space, one is just consumer demand wants their order tomorrow. They want to be able to
Yes.
order it today, get it next day. And then when freight either comes to us from truck or it goes to truck once it comes in. So, that we've got great partners in this region in moving freight on ground. So geography is a huge game changer, I think, for us. When we can reach with that DOT drive time limit of, major cities like Minneapolis, Chicago, Madison, Milwaukee, parts of Kansas City, parts of St. Louis, Des Moines, Omaha. We are rapidly coming up to speed here at the airport of growing our niche in that air cargo space. So we just don't see it slowing down. We've got more infrastructure coming online in the years ahead.
And we'll talk more about that. So Craig, from your perch in Des Moines, your statewide view of things, what do you see? We're going to slow down? Is this going to keep running amok or what? What's happening?
Well, it's not going to slow down, I don't expect, but what I think we need to take advantage of is our multimodal opportunities. So we're blessed to have Mississippi River on the east, Missouri on the west. Now you might wonder, well, how does the inland waterway system help truck traffic on I-380, I-80? Well, any increase in shipping up or down the inland waterway system using the locks and dams or just the waterway system on the Missouri can certainly assist in getting trucks off of I-380, 80, 30, you name it. So we need to embrace that. We need to assist in the ports and the transfer of freight at the inland waterway system. So I would say that's something that we can take advantage of and will assist with those trucks, which I think from like Iowa City east towards the Quad Cities, it used to be 1 in every 3 vehicles was a large truck, a semi tractor trailer. It's increasing, instead of 33%, it's 40 and on up %. So it's pushing that almost 1 in 2.
Wow.
We forecast in the next 20, 25 years. So I would definitely say it's not going to slow down.
Well, okay. So staying with you, Craig, walk us through this. How much cargo does Iowa see these days? And how does that work? You mentioned intermodal, which is a term you hear a lot. Maybe you could explain that to some of our folks. It goes from rail or air freight and then barge or truck or what's passing through and how's that working?
You got it. So in Iowa, there's about 667 million tons of cargo freight that moves within Iowa.
Is that a year, Craig?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So about 333 million of that 667 million, that moves within the state. Now, how does that move? Vast majority, 90+% is by truck. Again, that's just movements within our borders. Outbound, there's about 190 million tons, again, of that 667 number. Now that's where you start getting into some of it, 20, 30% by rail, same thing by water. That's where you start seeing more modes picking up and assisting in moving that freight out of the state. So the inverse coming into the state, about 150 million tons. So less than outbound because we're a producer state, except for some really small pockets like Muscatine County where you've got a lot of import of steel and whatever to make all different kinds of products that they make there. So that's an anomaly, but by and large, Iowa is a producer state. So more product going out than product coming in, which that creates an imbalance for intermodal So if you're talking about containerized shipments,
Right.
that's an issue. So that's something we're gonna have to figure out.
Okay. And we will. So, Marty, the airport has been growing a lot in terms of cargo capabilities in recent years, even more than Des Moines, right? You've got a 53,800 square foot facility, and that's where UPS is going. Correct me at any stage if I've got any of this wrong. And it's all part of the airport's business model. If you could talk about Cedar Rapids in particular, you mentioned this one day ground transportation that we can get to Minneapolis, we can get to Chicago, we can get to St. Louis and all these other places. How do you see the airport fitting into all this big grand scheme of being the gateway to the West?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is what's happened. I think you have to go to the air cargo hubs and take a look at what's happening at the major hubs, and that, St. Louisville, Memphis, Cincinnati, and their hubs are getting more pressure and are hitting capacity, and so you're seeing more cargo being pushed out to traditionally feeder airports. We have, and that's really the advantage starts there, and then our geography on top of it. The fact that we've got great infrastructure, like we've talked about, plays to our advantage. So we just, we're not seeing it slow down. We just launched a master plan process, and an important segment of that master planning process for the airport is a much deeper dive into air cargo and how we can continue to expand that and grow that footprint. And when you look at aircraft, this seems maybe at this stage a touch crazy talk, but I'm not sure that it is. But when you look at aircraft coming up over the pole from Asia, and you start looking at the cost of operating those aircraft, our cost models to land in Cedar Rapids isn't dramatically different than some of our major cargo hub airports are today. So we also have a cost equation that's comparable. And the bottom line, I think long before I was here, just years of really good long-range planning from commissions and land acquisitions over time. We've got the space to grow in scale as cargo carriers need, and to include, an additional parallel runway. And the runway was sited in such a way that you could would have enough separation between runway center lines to actually allow parallel approaches, which all seems quite hard to envision maybe now, but the bottom line is we're positioned to be able to capture that and grow as incrementally as that demand dictates. And our ability to get to these major metropolitan areas within that one-day drive time is significant. And if you look at the confines of I-80 and I-35, and look at the geography there versus our geography, and you boil it down to people, this region can reach up just under 12 million more people within that drive time radius than you can at 35 and 80. So again, a lot of things to our advantage. Our role right now is really rapidly trying to come up to speed and position ourselves as really a player in that space. You mentioned just cargo and some comparisons. I thought this was to give it some scale and where CID fits into things nationally. We are now the 68th busiest 68th busiest cargo airport in the country. We're actually pushing through more cargo than New Orleans on a comparative basis. So just to scale it, so it's it's our job to keep that rolling, I guess.
Yeah. That's a lot. 68 is a lot. I have no idea how many airports there are in America, but probably a lot, probably many, and that's pretty impressive. So, Mike, we've gotten a couple questions from people, from attendees, and I think we should start with you. The first question is, how has the labor shortage affected your respective industries? And how do you predict the job demand and labor shortages will affect the future of cargo transportation? And what in particular are you doing about last mile, prepare for the electrification of transportation? I'm not sure what specifically is meant by electrification of transportation. Does that mean, I'm thinking maybe it means driverless trucks, right?
I think it could mean two things, but
I'm going to defer to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first part, I would say we've never been more challenged. The industry has always struggled with having enough drivers for capacity since the pandemic. In my 38 years here at CRST, it's never been more challenging. Driver wages finally are on the rise. So the good news is shippers are at a point, customers are at a point where they have to get the capacity and they're willing to pay for it. So rates are up significantly. Our big challenge is, and it's something Marty talked about, is creating driving jobs where the driver can get home nightly. And so that what he just talked about, a driver can run from Cedar Rapids to Chicago and back and get home every night because they can do that within their 11 hours. And so that's one of our big challenges with our team division. We can't do that. And so we're trying to create loops where drivers get home every 5 days. But driver wages in the past year, drivers, a rough average of driver wages was $60,000 a year. It's now pushing 90 to 100,000 just in the last year. And that's creating significant pressure on rates. And it still is not possible for us to fill all our positions. We've got 5,000 company drivers, 2,500 owner operators. If I had 2,500 more drivers, I could easily keep them busy right now. That's how much freight's moving and that's how much demand is out there. As far as the electrification, I'm not certain how the question is. So in the final mile space, we have a final mile group. We bought a company 2 years ago that is one of the premier providers of final mile, doing a great job. It's all independent contractors. So for us, probably not electrification. Electrification in the big trucks is probably 5 to 10 years off. They just don't have the battery capacity to run 80,000 pounds and the range of 400 to 500 miles that we need to be efficient and effective. Locally, there's a lot of push for two things: CNG, so natural gas trucks, and electric trucks. And we are starting to see that come online in what we call the Class 7 trucks, the smaller local regional trucks. We are starting to see that more and more.
When do you think we're going to see electric trucks on our highways?
We already have some electric trucks on our highways. They're mostly in test. We work with our OEM quite closely. I think they'll have, there's already trucks there, Michael, but I think production for trucks that do the majority of what we do, where they can run 400 or 500 miles,
right,
I still think that's 5 years off. The diesel trucks are still pretty efficient. The ironic part is what they've done in the emission standards, the air coming out of our stacks is now cleaner than the air that's going into our stacks or into our exhaust system. So the NOx that's produced by a tractor trailer today is actually better than what it is on your car. So they're pretty energy efficient, and fuel economy is now over 8 miles a gallon for trucks. When I started, it was 5.
Marty, I don't know if you could speak to this in terms of the airport, in terms of employment and labor shortage, because we all know you don't employ the pilots. or the flight attendants or the TSA people, but you have everybody else who's out there. And you have people in the cargo station, the cargo hubs who are moving things around. Those all come into the airport. And how are you finding that in terms of employment?
Well, actually, each of the cargo operators have their own teams as well. So
I misspoke. Sorry.
yeah, no problem. UPS, FedEx, DHL, they all have their own staff. But there's no question labor shortages are everywhere, including cargo. Some of the biggest issues for the industry right now are pilots and mechanics. 2020, there was a looming pilot shortage prior to the pandemic, and what happened with the pandemic, those that were close enough to retirement took early buyouts, and now as the industry is trying to recover, we have a pipeline issue of pilots. And as those pilots get hired from regional airlines, the smaller carriers that are feeding the major networks, and that goes for air cargo, same setup. There's feeder systems coming from smaller communities and feeding the larger network carriers. Those pilots are getting hired up, and there's just really a pipeline problem. And so that's going to be a drag, certainly on the industry. We're seeing, for entry-level jobs, when I first came out of college in the business, it wasn't uncommon for a first-year pilot to be in the neighborhood of $30,000 a year, 28, 30, 32,000. They now are seeing just the bonus structure for a regional pilot and upwards of $150,000 to $180,000. And I'm not even talking about mechanics. I mean, it's really a challenge. And so whether that'll equate to is there going to be the belly space in aircraft, because you have fewer aircraft flying to accommodate the demand, which puts, as Mike kind of alluded to, there's going to be pressure on prices across the board. So things are, okay right now, but there's definitely stressors in the system, no question. And they have truck shortages for these carriers as well. So,
and when we talk about pressure, what we mean by that, by pressure and stresses, we're talking about where we push the cost. How much do you eat? How much do you push onto the customer? How much do you add onto the product? Okay. Okay.
Can your community support the service at the end of the day as pressures go up? If you look at cargo aside, if you look at airlines, they're not making 50-seat aircraft anymore. So can small communities support larger airplanes? So there's pressure across the system, and those prices are going to come to the consumer ultimately.
So Craig, at IDOT, I bet you talk to lots of businesses. And what are you hearing about this in terms of hiring for various transportation kind of jobs?
Yeah, you actually read my mind, Michael. So we were involved in updating our state long-range transportation plan. Again, that's looking out 25, 30 years into the future. So we got to get our crystal ball out and shine it up really good. As part of that development process, our Iowa DOT director, Scott Marler, he had a vision for reaching out to business and industry and other groups. We had our first business-focused meeting, I don't know, a month or so ago in Sioux City. And there were probably 30 businesses represented around the table. And so we asked them, what's your number one transportation issue that keeps you up at night? Went around the table, and I bet 80% of the respondents said, I can't get somebody to drive my semi, my delivery truck, my whatever. So it's a staffing issue, no doubt about it. So then we talked about, are there some things that the department can do to assist that? And I don't want to jump too far ahead in your questions, but you've got one question that really deals with, well, what about the impact of the Trevero facility that just opened up? What about the intermodal facility that Iowa Northern Railroad has just to the west of Shell Rock, to the northwest of your metro area. Can those help? And I brought up the inland waterway. So if we can bring product in, ship product out those long distances, that frees up those drivers to do those day trips. So then they're maybe not last mile, but they're last 100 miles or 50 miles. So there's definitely some opportunity there for the department as well as others to invest in those types of intermodal facilities, those facilities that can help with those long haul movements.
So I've been in Cedar Rapids for about 10 years. And as long as I've been here, we've been talking about worker shortage, and we've been talking about a driver shortage, probably for all that time, even before the pandemic. So Mike, I want to ask you from CRST's perspective, how is recruiting and training go? And we talked a little bit about this before, but how the vaccine mandate is going to affect that. Is it going to affect that?
First I'll start. Since the pandemic, I would say we saw a pretty sizable group of drivers, both with CRST and across the industry last year, exit the industry, just said, I'm done. I don't want to be out there amongst the public. And we thought 5%. We've seen some that said 10% that just left the industry. I would say two things. And one, I got to give a shout out to Craig's folks at the Iowa DOT. So we run a driving school here in Cedar Rapids where we bring new people into the industry. We've always been a big supporter of that for two reasons. One, we can train them right and safely. We got an excellent relationship with Iowa DOT. They used to help, or they still help us do testing. Federal government put in some permit restrictions where people from out of state used to be able to come in and get an Iowa permit and then go back to their home state. That no longer is. So that's cut our ability to bring new people in and train by half, which is problematic. And across the industry, just bringing new people into it, the training is probably the most critical. I think we've stabilized. The wages seem to be the wages that I talked about earlier that are bringing wages up, seem to be having some success. Our flatbed group, which is all independent contractors, those rates are up significantly in the last 2 years. We've actually grown that group after 4 years of it shrinking. We've grown that group nicely in the last 18 months. So I think the biggest one is getting wages to where people are going to want to do it. And then what I talked about and Marty and Craig both talked about is that more regional driving position. That's what drivers want. They want to be home every day. I forgot your second question, Michael.
Well, you had brought up about the impact of the vaccine mandate,
Yeah.
and is there going to be an impact?
So if it comes to pass, and we don't know that it will, I don't want to speak for the Biden administration, but we did a survey, and the ATA did a survey, and we did a survey of our drivers, and 55% are vaccinated. And I have a good relationship with a lot of our drivers, especially our long-term drivers that have been here 15, 20, 30 years. And there's a real fear. And some people say, Jesus, why don't you get the vaccine? They're just talking to hundreds of them. So we did a survey, and 45% of our drivers said, I'll leave the industry if I'm forced to get a vaccine. Well, out of 7,000 drivers, if 40% of them leave, that's one carrier. Now, they may go to a carrier smaller than 100 trucks, but their ability to take on that many and have the trucks for that, and then they become a more than 100 truck carrier and they're subject to the rules. We think it could be a big impact on an already stressed supply chain. And so in conjunction with ATA, we've put forth our concerns for the industry and the supply chain that we think, at least at this time, very challenging idea to a supply chain that's already under a lot of duress and stress, as Marty talked about earlier.
ATA is the American Trucking Association?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That 45%, of drivers who said that they did not want to get a vaccine. Was there any overriding theme to why?
So we asked that question, and it broke down to three. So 5% of the 5% of that group said, I just haven't gotten around to it. I've been on the road. I haven't had time. And we're trying to work with them to avail them opportunities at our terminals, at our different region centers to do that. The majority, well over 60%, said, I'm never going to get it. I'm afraid of it, and I don't want to. And then I would say there's a portion that I'm not going to be told what to do, but I was shocked at just how many truly were scared, to the point I reached out and called probably a dozen that I knew and just said, talk to me about this. And they said, it's not tested. I don't know it's going to work. I don't know, and I read all these things, but I just don't feel comfortable with it. So I think that's the number one. We're trying to work with our guys and ladies to, if they do want to get it, make sure, I think it was a bit of a, not wake up for us, but hey, let's help them when they're off on home time or when they get in. Let's find them places where they can get the vaccine quickly. But majority is just pure, I would say, just fear of the unknown.
Yeah, that's not dramatically different than what we've seen of other surveys in other industries throughout the state and the country. Yeah. So Craig, talk to this if you would. Here in Cedar Rapids, the city council in June approved tax credits for FedEx to locate a $108.6 million warehouse and distribution center in Trevero, as you mentioned. The Alliant Energy Transportation subsidiary has a 259,000 square foot logistics park under construction in Fairfax. And I'm reading this so that I get these numbers right. What does this do for Iowa in terms of warehousing and distribution as an industry? Does this add or subtract to the strain of moving cargo in and out of the state? Does it? And I'm going to come to you, Marty, next after this, because it's kind of for you too.
Oh, it certainly has to help that you have more square footage under roof where you can bring product in, send product out. As far as the department, so what that does to us, certainly we've got programs to help with the rail industry, add the spur track, things like that. We've got a revitalized Iowa Sound economy that there's been a ton of projects in this area that have received funding through that to assist in building the roads for industrial parks or warehousing, things like that. But then also it puts an emphasis on projects like Rhett Brothers Boulevard, that interchange, and reconstructing that. How do we reconstruct that? How do we make it so it functions well for the increased freight plus the existing freight that's there? So those are the things that the department is dealing with in regards to those facilities.
What do you think, Marty? Is that going to help and is that going to help move more in and out of the state, or is that more, is that less, or is that, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it helps. I think it helps tremendously. I think it helps in a variety of ways. I think it's when I think of getting that infrastructure, more of that infrastructure that we talked about earlier in terms of highways and location, getting that distribution, logistics also set up well. It's part of that infrastructure that really feeds that for Eastern Iowa, that overall freight logistics fulfillment center space, and prepares us, I think, in this region quite well for what tomorrow looks like in the e-commerce, that, places like, business parks like Big Cedar or the Airport Super Park and those sorts of things. I think it puts us in a position to recruit other facilities, gives us a bit of a competitive advantage if we can get supply chain materials in and out quicker and be part of a really robust supply chain in that freight logistics. I think it has a lot of upsides. to us. So I think it helps tremendously.
Here's a smart aleck question for any one of you, and this follows up from that. Who's going to work in these facilities and who's going to drive these trucks? I mean, we're talking about we don't have enough people right now. Who are we going to get to do this? Craig, got any answers?
Well, sure. So with Trevero, so that's on the Krennic rail line. And
Yes.
so ideally, that's bringing in product by rail in containers and then offloaded and then distributed that last mile. So again, that's hopefully freeing up some long haul truck drivers that would focus more on the short haul. So I suspect that would be easier to recruit those extra 2,500 that Mike needs. But then it also, if we can bring more product in by container, then that helps that imbalance that I mentioned where, we're a producer state, so we need those containers. We need to get in those full containers that then we can empty, and then we can fill back up with Iowa products and ship back the other direction. So that certainly helps as far as efficiency and movement of freight in the state.
Mike, do those economics make sense?
I would say, Michael, you take the FedEx, right? You can't create jobs if you don't have the opportunity. And so them investing in us, and I think it goes back to your first question, right? We're in such a good position in Cedar Rapids with our location and our roads, and as both Marty and Craig have pointed out, our geographic footprint to major freight consuming hubs, it just puts us in a great place. Yes, it's a challenge, but if FedEx doesn't come here and build, we don't have that opportunity to create jobs. So hopefully there's more people in the corridor, there's more growth. And that's a multi-year, but I don't think FedEx, they're pretty sharp people. And I don't think they invest here if they don't think we're going to be able to grow here and do it. And it will bring trucks, our trucks, other trucks to the area to help support them. And so I just think it's a real exciting time for Cedar Rapids for both those projects.
So here's a question. I'm going to stick with you, Mike. And not to get too much into the weeds, but road infrastructure is paid for by local, county, and state government. How are semis assessed fees to compensate for their impact on public pavement? Without getting too in depth on that.
Yeah. So we pay a fuel tax, and we think it's a very fair share. We think we more than pay for our share of the roads, and that is. Fuel is our second largest expense, and a large portion of that fuel expense is the fuel tax that goes to roads, and it goes both state. So every state, we're apportioned an amount with each state, and we have to file fuel tax filings every year for each state for the miles we run in that, and then nationally. That in general, that's how we pay for our fair share of it.
Okay. I don't know if I mentioned, I used to work on a freight dock when I was in high school. So truck drivers have a good place in my heart. Probably also affected some of my vocabulary, but I try to watch that in most cases. So Marty, we have a question that's sort of kind of about this. Early on in the pandemic, the airport rolled out a bunch of health protection measures. You had masks, you had temperature checks, you had all sorts of things. And where are we now? Do I need to show my vaccine card to get in the airport? What's going on? I'm asking you, where are we?
Yeah. Well, so it's a little bit off freight topic, I suppose, but no. Well, the best thing to do really to tell travelers is check with your individual airline because the situation is so fluid. And you're particularly if you're going overseas, things change, and your carriers are the best ones that have all the latest and greatest information. If you need your vax card or not, if you need to be tested before you go or not, it's just been fluid. I'll just leave it at that. as far, what we did is an airport early on the health screening we partnered with Mercy Medical Center and had offered, while it was a condition to have access to the gate areas, the area of the terminal that we call the sterile area, the post-security screening. In order to access that, you had to submit to health screening, and the health screening was done by healthcare professionals. To our knowledge, we were the only airport in the nation that did such a thing. Everybody had opinions, for sure. But we looked at it as, our responsibility to ensure safety for, our customers, our employees. The pandemic, the scale that we've gone through it's never been done. We've never faced something like this, at least in recent history. And so we took kind of that all-in approach, like, we're going to try as many things as possible to spur people back to being comfortable traveling and restore, the health of our business. And so it went pretty well. If I'd do it again, under the same set of circumstances, and we learned a lot. I think as an organization, we are much better prepared if there's ever, God help us if we have to go through it again, but I think we're much better prepared for it. It wasn't a solution that worked for everybody, but our guess, based on surveys, the responses were quite strong that they felt better coming through, that we were doing those sorts of measures. So we were quite aggressive about it.
So Craig, on a related note, what do you hear from businesses and what do you see in DOT in terms of adjustments because of the pandemic, in terms of, your employers and what they need to do that's different than what they used to need to do?
Boy, I'm not sure I've got much to add to that question. I don't deal much directly with individual businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. No, that's how we find out. I ask these questions. Mike, truckers, you talked about the mandate. What other sorts of responses have you seen, and what has CRST done since March of 2020 that's different because of the pandemic?
So I think the initial one and the one that we continue to do, and the requests are frankly less, but getting PPP out to all our drivers. So masks were a big thing, and we very quickly secured a lot of masks. Sanitizer, we gave each of our drivers basically a protection packet, and it was a little bag and had all those things in it. I think similar to the airport, things have opened up. It was really challenging for our drivers because truck stops, restaurants were closed. Even the convenience store side of truck stops were closed, and people don't realize, those drivers, that's where they eat, that's where they shower, that's where they refuel, and both personally and the truck, and so I think we're through all that. I think drivers have acclimated to it and now have a rhythm like the rest of us of how to do their job safely. We still provide all those things. The request, especially probably for like sanitizer, down a lot. And then we encourage all our employees to get vaccinated. So, I don't want anybody listening to say we don't support the vaccine. But it's a reality. As you said, there's a percentage that doesn't want to, and there's a percentage that already, like myself, has been vaccinated. So I think we just continue to push safety throughout, as we do with all our safety. It's become a large part of our overall safety package of what we do to keep drivers safe.
For those of you watching, I want to remind you, we've got about a dozen minutes left in this panel. If you have any questions, now's the time to submit them in the chat box down there so that they can get to our panel. All right, so here's a big question. I did want to talk about supply chain. We see all these photos in the news of the cargo stacked, the intermodal cargo things stacked up at various ports in Los Angeles and New Jersey and China and London and various other places. So supply chain bottlenecks have been in the news, and even more so since the beginning of the pandemic. It's due to a lot of factors, from health safety to a worker shortage, container backups, ports on ships at the coast, to now buildup of, we have we're getting product shortages. There's a paper shortage for packaging, right? There'll be fewer Christmas catalogs. There'll be fewer books. Unless it's a bestseller, there won't be reprints. Bookstores are having issues on getting more books. Look into your crystal balls, each of you. Is this a temporary thing? Are we going to get this smoothed out so we can move forward? And are we going to get all the toys we want for Christmas? Or is this going to get, Marty, cargo, is this going to get smoothed out someday soon?
It's hoping you started somewhere else.
There are only three of you.
Mike are way smarter. That's a tough question. I think it's here for a while. I think the supply chain there's a lot of catch up, and then you have the workforce issue that's got to get caught up. So I think it's, time's going to tell. It's, I'm, on a pilot supply, I mean, there's going to be an issue there for us for a while. So if you don't have the capacity on the air side, less airplanes flying, what does that look like? So I think the supply chain, it's going to take some time. I think there's certainly nationally, I think we as a country have learned a lot. I think there's opportunities out there to kind of reshore a lot of that supply chain. I think personally, I think you'll see more of that going on, and a lot. I know just as a business, many of us are looking at resiliency and our planning and that sort of thing. So, I think it's going to be with us for a while. I couldn't even predict when we'd be out of it, but it's going to be with us for a few years.
Greg, Mike, sorry, I meant to go to Mike next. What do you think? You're dealing with truckers all the time.
Yeah, so I would agree with Marty wholeheartedly. We just had one of our largest customers from Southern California in yesterday, and they're very close to the port situation. And Southern Cal happens to be our largest market by far where we serve our customers. There's no end in sight to the port. In the past 3 months, there was 50 ships docked outside the port of Long Beach in Los Angeles. Today, there's 90. It just keeps growing by 20 a month. And it is just a bottleneck. They're not increasing the capacity at the ports. I think to your original question, Michael, it will solve itself. We are seeing customers that are nearshoring, that are moving to other ports, that are doing more air freight. I just read a report that air freight is going to go up 50% next year. But our projection is that this supply chain disruption stays with us certainly through 2022. I don't know that anybody can look beyond that, but I asked this customer, I said, do you see the port thing alleviating anytime soon? And he said it will not be done before the end of 2022.
Wow.
So I think it's here to stay. We're doing everything we can to get your toys to you. If they get off the truck, we're going to get them there.
Okay, fair enough.
So don't blame the truckers. But there is, I will say this, there is a lot more freight moving. There's just a lot more demand of freight moving. And it does go back to what you talked about at the very start, Michael, is the e-commerce is moving a lot more freight through the network, and the whole system has not caught up. Over time, I think it will, but in the short run, short being the next 12 to 18 months, I think it's going to continue to be a challenge.
Craig, what do you think from your point of view?
Yeah, so definitely the supply chain issues are not just in the United States. I mean, you got to trace it back. They're having issues in China and the other countries that are putting those products in those containers, in those container ships that are then docked out in the, the Bay of LA Long Beach and waiting their turn. I mean, there's only so many cranes. There's only so many longshoremen. They can only load, unload so many of those boxes every day. Yeah, I mean, my crystal ball is pretty cloudy, but what I'm seeing is same as Mike. 2022, probably going to see the same thing we're seeing today. Now, anecdotally, actually was working with a business in the Cedar Rapids area. Oh, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 months ago, and they were having issues. Prior to pandemic, cost $5,000 for a container box to bring it in. That was a shipping cost.
Wow.
Now it's, several months ago, it was up to $15,000 if you could even get the box.
Right.
If you can get the shipping company to give you the space on the ship. So, and I'm sure it's gotten more expensive than that, and even to the point where, again, the shipping companies, they own those boxes, and when they land in LA Long Beach, they're not wanting to put that box on a rail car and have it come out to Chicago and then go wherever. They're wanting that box to be emptied at LA Long Beach, put on a truck or what have you, and then they want that box back on that container ship and headed back to where it came from, so they can make another turn with it. So those are the issues that they're facing, and which could impact the rail industry, could impact the trucking industry. Maybe that's more truck movements. I don't know. Maybe that makes it more economical to use Marty's airport. I don't know, but these are the things that are going to evolve over time, based on what's happening.
All right, so Mike, I know you know a lot more about this than I do. Yesterday, there was the announcement that the White House had reached a deal with the Los Angeles ports about working 24/7. I don't know where that stands right now. Where does that stand right now? Are they going to work that out? And I realize you're here in Iowa with the rest of us, but that's sounds like that would help, wouldn't it?
It definitely would. So just as example, we have one customer, and it's exactly to Craig's point, that we do outbound and we pick up in the Southern Cal region, and we do outbound. We do 90 containers on the first shift. We can do 30 on the second shift because there just isn't the capacity, and we do a trickle on the weekend. And I've been, for the longest time, why don't they go 24/7? So if they expand that, it literally could double the throughput, I think, of what's happening. And that's me loosely understanding it. But just from my vantage point, that the work, most of the work that's being done is done on one shift, and then it slows down on the second shift, and there's nothing on a third shift, and there's very little on the weekend. So if they expand that, it could double the on and off. And I think if they can reach an agreement, the longshoremen I think their next contract is up mid next year. I don't know that they're going to parlay this into that to get a resolution. I don't know enough about that.
Okay.
It definitely will help.
Okay. So you're saying if they had listened to you sooner, we'd be farther along.
Not me. I do have one real quick. The strangest story I've heard in my 38 years. Had a major retailer. We were out at their office, and they said, "We've had a really weird thing because of what Craig talked about. These container ships are so full, they're stacking them higher and higher. They lost 3 of their containers that fell off the container ship or somewhere down at the bottom of the ocean."
Oh my gosh.
Because they're overloading the container ships.
Craig, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think that somehow gets lost. It's just not having the products made and getting them on ship. It's the whole thing about the cargo containers that we see going by on trucks, and we see them going by on trains, and they get loaded onto freight and onto planes that those need to be loaded and unloaded so other things can be put in them and shipped around. Yeah, okay, so we've got we're just about at time here. So we're at the lightning round now, or the speed dating segment of the panel. This is for each of you. What is the one thing you see as the biggest cargo challenge, and it can be in your sector or anywhere, for 2022? What's the big thing you really would like us to see get resolved so we can have, I don't know, a better world and a happy holiday, whatever. Marty, what do you think? What's the one thing we still got to get over?
I mean, for us, it's one thing we got to get over, huh? For us, it's work. I guess I have to say workforce, but that's a combination of pilots and mechanics, like I said, because that's a long-term, that's a problem that's a capacity problem for us.
Mike, what do you think?
Absolutely workforce. We've just got to have both unloading trucks, loading trucks, longshoremen, drivers. We've just got to have more workforce.
More people, more people.
More people.
Yeah. Craig, what do you think? What's the one thing?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe you'll circle back to what Mike said about running 24/7 at the ports like LA Long Beach and Charleston and wherever is, if they can ramp that capacity up, assuming the rail industry can then also handle the additional loads and the trucking industry can handle additional loads. I mean, there's a lot of moons that have to line up for this. You can't just offload a lot more containers and they happen to get to where they're supposed to go and vice versa. So yeah, maybe it does circle back around to we just need more folks in the state and elsewhere helping with supply chain process.
I cannot tell you how many panels I've been on and stories I've written about workforce, and we need more. We need more. We need more. All right, we're pretty much at time. I want to thank our panelists. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to thank everyone who joined us here today. Remember, we have lots more panels. We have more panel specials sessions today. We've got them lined up for tomorrow. They are all being recorded. So if you get to the end of Friday and it was something you wanted to see, it's going to be here on our site, including an interview with Governor Reynolds. I wasn't in the newsroom, but I believe that happened earlier today. You can see all of those. Check back at our site. You can catch them there. Thank you to everyone. I hope you have a very good day, and I've got another panel to go to. So thank you. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye-bye.